So welcome everybody. I'm Mary Poole with Soft Landing Missoula. And this is our, kind of you, thank you. This is our fourth lecture in our Soft Landing Missoula Presents lecture series. It's titled Timeless Iraq, and we're especially excited for this lecture because it is the first lecture presented by a refugee that has been recently resettled here in Missoula. So huge thanks to Mushtaq for that.
Thank you.
Really quick, I wanted to give a big thanks to our sponsors. We're always very grateful for the University of Montana sponsoring this event with us, especially the University of Montana Global Engagement, College of the Humanities and Sciences, and Davidson Honors College. I will also say that MCAT is here filming tonight, and we're always very grateful for their filming for us. I am here to introduce Christopher Comer, who's with the Colleges of Humanities and Sciences, and he is here to introduce our speaker. But of note, just on a little bit of programming, we decided to stick a Q&A session right after Mushtaq's talk. So the program will be Mushtaq talking, and then we'll have 15 minutes for a Q&A directly with him. And then Jen and I, with the Soft Landing Missoula and the International Rescue Committee, will give kind of a brief recap of 2017, how things are going here in Missoula, our first full year of resettlement, and a brief outlook of 2018, and again, time for more questions. So without further ado, thank you, Christopher Comer.
Thanks very much. I'd like to welcome everybody here tonight. I have the pleasure of being the Dean of the College of Humanities and Sciences, and on behalf of my colleagues, my brother and sister deans, I'd just like to welcome you tonight and point out that thanks is due in both directions because it's really wonderful for the campus community to have Soft Landing in Missoula doing wonderful work and to keep us abreast of what's going on in the world and to give us an outlet to help. My connection here tonight is personal. My wife and I have volunteered for Soft Landing, and we've become very close friends with an Eritrean family, and they have taught us much more and given us much more than I think we've been able to give them. But it's been a really wonderful experience. So I'm very excited to introduce Mushtaq tonight. Let me tell you just a little bit about him. He grew up in Bashika in northern Iraq. He received his bachelor's degree in translation from Mosul University in 2003. In 2010, he was awarded a Fulbright scholarship for graduate study, and he came to study at UM. He graduated in 2012 with a master's degree in linguistics, and then he returned to Iraq. In 2017, he was able to return to the U.S. with his wife and his unborn child under the refugee resettlement program, and he now lives in Missoula. The title for tonight is Timeless Iraq. Mushtaq.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I'm really happy that we got this turnout. I would like to thank Soft Landing Missoula for organizing this event and giving me this opportunity to talk about my country, my religion, and my hometown. And I also would like to thank IRC for their support and all my friends and acquaintances who have been very helpful and supportive of me and my family since we arrived here in Missoula and also when I was a student at the University of Montana. Thank you again, and I hope you enjoy the presentation. I'll try to be as informative and clear and detailed as possible so that I can give you something useful and enjoyable. So my talk is Timeless Iraq. So I am going to be talking basically about Iraq, details about Iraq, and then I will be talking about my religion, Yazidi, and then my hometown, Bashika, and then lastly about the recent ISIS crisis that hit northern Iraq, including my hometown. So speaking Iraq geographically, Iraq is one of the Arab countries. It lies in the Middle East, and it's almost the size of California. Iraq is bordered by Turkey to the north, Syria and Jordan to the west, Saudi Arabia and Kuwait to the south, and Iran to the east. Iraq has a narrow section of coastline measuring 35 miles on the northern Arab Gulf. Baghdad, the capital city, is almost in the center of the country. Two major rivers, the Euphrates and Tigris, run through Iraq, flowing from northwest to southeast. They provide it with agriculturally capable land. And this is just to give you an idea about where Iraq is exactly located. See, like Europe, Africa, and Asia. And it's like almost in the heart of the Middle Eastern area, or the Middle East. Iraq historically was known as Mesopotamia. The Daily Show, Jon Stewart, once jokingly described as Mesopotamia. Yeah. It was home to several successive civilizations since the 6th millennium before Christ. The area between the Tigris and the Euphrates is identified as the cradle of civilization and the birthplace of writing and the wheel. Baghdad became the capital city of the prosperous Islamic Caliphate, and for more than 3 centuries, starting in 750 AD. And then the country was invaded by the Ottomans, who ruled most Arab countries for 4 centuries, including Iraq. Modern Iraq's map was created or was drawn by the British, who invaded the country between 1918 and 1958. Actually, Iraq's border drawing was part of, or was based in part on the terms of the notorious Sykes-Picot Agreement, signed by the British and the French, and by which lands, or Arab lands under the rule of the Ottoman Empire, were divided into British and French spheres of influence with the conclusion of World War I. The two colonial powers, France and Britain, elevated minorities loyal to them to powerful positions in Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon, a policy which later contributed to sectarian tensions in these countries. The Kurds, who ended up as scattered minorities in 4 countries, have long held a deep grievance against the Sykes-Picot Agreement, saying that it treated them unfairly and deprived them from establishing their own state. So here, this is the outline of the Sykes-Picot Agreement, how the British and the French divided the 4 countries, or areas of 4 countries, into their spheres of influence. This area was for British rule, and the area above for the French rule or French influence, and that yellow area with the name Armenia was under the Russian influence. And that happened during World War I. And a lot of people think or view this, this agreement with a lot of animosity and grievance. The British appointed a Sunni monarch loyal to them in Iraq in 1920. And the Sunni minority continued to rule the country through successive unelected governments until 2003, when U.S. forces toppled Saddam's regime, opening the door for national elections, when the Shia majority in Iraq were successful in taking power. The Shia-Sunni divide has been dominating the scene in Iraq's modern Iraq's politics, and sectarianism has been the main destabilizing factor in Iraq since 2003. Broadly speaking, 2 countries that compete for the leadership of Islam, Sunni Saudi Arabia and Shia Iran, have used the sectarian divide in the Middle East to further their ambitions in the region, especially in Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, Bahrain, and Yemen. And going back to the Shia and Sunni divide, Shia and Sunni Muslims originally split over who should rightfully succeed the Prophet Muhammad at his death in 632 AD. A group of prominent early followers of Islam elected Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, a companion of Prophet Muhammad, to be the first caliph or leader of the Islamic community, over the objections of those who favored Ali bin Abi Talib, Muhammad's cousin and son-in-law. The two opposing camps in the succession debate eventually evolved into Islam's two main sects. Speaking of Saddam Hussein, the Sunni ruler of Iraq, the Ba'ath regime ruled Iraq for 35 years after taking power through military coup d'etat in 1968. Saddam himself took office in 1979 and started a war with Iran that lasted for 8 devastating years and resulted in hundreds of thousands of casualties from both sides. The United States backed Saddam in his war with Iran in the 80s and then led a coalition to drive his forces out of Kuwait in 1991 and eventually toppled his regime in 2003. Following the Iraq's invasion of Kuwait in 1991, the UN imposed 13-year economic sanctions on Iraq that, along with the regime's war, crippled the economy and created countless and devastating dilemmas inside the Iraqi community or society that are almost impossible to eliminate. Sometimes friends here in Missoula describe me as getting stressed out easily. And I guess that growing up in a country like Iraq was not the honeymoon that anyone can dream of. It was certainly traumatizing. Iraq's diverse population, or Iraq has a diverse population that consists of Arabs, the majority, and Kurds, the second largest population, who live in the northern parts. There are other minority ethnic groups like Assyrians, Chaldeans, and Iraqi Turkmen. Ethnic and religious minorities live in the northern area of Iraq, especially around the city of Mosul and the oil-rich city of Kirkuk. So here, this map gives you an idea about the three main factions in Iraq. Shia Muslims mainly live in this area. Sunni Muslims mainly live in this area. And the yellow area is populated by the Kurds. Kurds are also Muslims, but they differ in ethnicity from the rest of Iraq. These three factions have been dominating Iraq's politics since 2003. Right now, our prime minister is Shia Muslim. Our parliament leader is Sunni Muslim, and our honorary president of Iraq is a Kurd. And it has almost always been the case since 2003. They kind of share these positions among themselves because they are the majority or the strongest factions in the country. And problems among them have led to a lot of instability and chaos in Iraq still. Iraq also has a religious diversity. 90% of the population are Muslims. Shia Muslims form 60% and live mainly in the middle and southern parts of the country. The rest of Muslims are Sunnis. Other religions include Christians, Yazidis, and Mandaeans. Around 150,000 Jewish people used to live in Iraq before they left the country in the 50s and 60s of the past century. So Christians, referring to Christians, Mandaeans, and Yazidis. Kurdistan region, whose population is 17% of the total population of Iraq, lies in the northern mountainous area of Iraq. Kurds are mostly Muslim. They speak Kurdish, and Kurdistan has been an autonomous region since 1991 and officially governed by Kurdistan Regional Government. Erbil is the capital city of the region, and Kurdistan is famous for its beautiful summer resorts and mild weather compared to other parts of Iraq. Kurdistan held a referendum on September 25th, 2017 to determine whether its people support seceding from Iraq. That referendum also included areas like the oil-rich city of Kirkuk and other disputed areas that are under the control of Peshmerga. The result was overwhelmingly yes. About 92% of the population voted yes for independence. However, this referendum was met with fierce opposition from Baghdad government and regional international powers, including the United States. 3 weeks after the referendum was held, Iraqi forces and Shia militias advanced into Kirkuk and other disputed areas. The Peshmerga retreated from most of those areas following some clashes with Iraqi forces that resulted in casualties from both sides. The Kurds say that they have been betrayed by the US administration, which did not take sides in the fallout that prompted Kurdistan President Masoud Barzani to step down earlier this month after 12 years in office. It seems that this referendum has cost the Kurds the territorial gains that they had worked hard to secure since 2003. Some scenes or landscapes from Kurdistan, which can be very beautiful. Iraqi people's traits. Iraqi people are in general religious, conservative, kind, and have good hospitality. Iraq was recently rated #1 country in the world in terms of its people's hospitality. Iraqis like their customs and traditions and focus on them in life more than personal freedom. They extend families, and reputation is very important for them in the community. Iraqis are highly emotional people, and ethnic and religious affiliation tends to be very strong among Iraqis. Tribal system is common in Iraq, and relatives marriage is still common in Iraq. Languages spoken in Iraq. So there are several languages spoken by the people living in Iraq. Arabic is the first official language spoken in Iraq. Kurdish is the second official language, and there are some other regional languages spoken by ethnic and religious minorities, like Assyrian, Turkmeni, and Shabaki. Arabic language is characterized by what's called in linguistics bilingual diglossia, a type of diglossia in which one variety is used in writing and is referred to as high or prestigious, and another variety is used in speech and is known as low or colloquial variety. Iraqi people, just like all other Arab communities, have their own spoken variety of Arabic, which can be very distinct from modern standard Arabic. Popular dishes or delicious dishes. Yeah. So just to give you examples about the dishes known or popular in Iraq, there are a lot of dishes very, very good. So for example, dolma, maqluba or upside down, biryani, kubba, kebab, quzi, falafel, and there are many others. Rice tends to be the main component of many of those dishes. Drinking tea is very common in Iraq. It's actually part of the Iraqi culture to drink tea. A lot of people just drink in houses and cafes. Very good. These are very good dishes. However, not very healthy. Yeah. Too much fat and sodium, not my favorite. Yeah. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the Yazidis, the religion that I belong to. So who are the Yazidis? The Yazidis belong to an ethno-religious group that predates Islam and is said to have roots in Zoroastrianism, a monotheistic religion that developed in ancient Persia around 1500 before Christ. Yazidis have sometimes been described or called Kurdish heterodox group, meaning that they are ethnic Kurds but outside the mainstream of the community and culture. The word Yazidi simply means worshippers of God. Due to long centuries of persecution and organized genocide, much of the faith remains shrouded in mystery, with outsiders not allowed to convert and believers or followers not willing to share details of their rituals. And the last sentence has a reason. As Yazidis have always been reluctant to share details of their religion to outsiders, because usually those outsiders would go and write books or articles about Yazidis, making false claims about the religion. The latest example of this happened in 1999, when there was a solar eclipse that happened in my hometown. My hometown was on the path of totality of the solar eclipse, and it was clearly seen. that attracted a lot of journalists from the region to come to my hometown to witness the exciting event. One of the journalists was from Egypt. After watching the eclipse, he became very curious to know about the Yazidis after he heard that they were the main or the majority of my hometown. So he began making interviews with clerics to get as much information as he wanted about the religion in order to write about Yazidis. He did that, and he got back to his own country, his home country. Six months later, he wrote an article about Yazidis with the title, Yazidis, Devil or Sun Worshippers. Among the many wrong things he wrote about Yazidis, he literally said that I saw people with tails. Tails. I don't know where he got that from. Yeah, he certainly didn't see anyone. And he described my hometown as the biggest center of devil worshipping on the face of earth. I don't know. I mean, let's say that Yazidis are devil worshippers. How could you describe a town that has 2 mosques and 4 churches as the biggest center of devil worshipping on earth? It just doesn't make any sense. So just to give you an idea about such things when they happen. Yazidis believe in one God as the creator of the world, which he placed under the care of 7 angels, the chief of whom is Taus Malak, or the peacock angel. Some beliefs view the peacock angel as a fallen angel or devil for refusing to bow to Adam. Yazidis interpret it as a test to the peacock angel's commitment to God, and see the peacock angel as the chief of God's angels. Yazidi society, hierarchical. Yazidi society is organized in a caste system with divisions between clerics and laymen. The secular leader is a hereditary prince, whereas the chief sheikh heads the religious hierarchy. Members of the 3 Yazidi castes, peers, sheikhs, and laymen, may only marry within their group. Yazidis never intermarry with other religions and accept no converts. It's strictly not allowed. Yazidis' holy books are said to be the Book of Illumination and the Black Book. Manuscripts of both books published in the past are considered forgeries written by non-Yazidis. A true text of both books may exist but remain obscure. But the real core text of the religion are what's called hymns, which are written in Kurdish. They have been orally transmitted throughout most of the Yazidi history, but are now being collected with the assent of the community, effectively transforming Yazidism into a scriptural religion. Yazidis' religious practice. Yazidis have 3 daily prayers with their face towards the sun. Wednesday is their holy day. Yazidis usually always light candles in religious ceremonies as a sign of the triumph of light over darkness. Children are baptized at birth, and circumcision is very common, but only to boys. Yazidi men grow their mustache. Lalish, Yazidis' holy shrine, lies in a very beautiful valley between the city of Mosul and Duhok. Yazidis usually do a 7-day pilgrimage to Lalish in October of every year. Furthermore, hundreds of journalists and tourists from around the world visit the shrine every year. Sometimes it's called the sanctuary of Lalish because it was the last resort of the few Yazidis who escaped the deadly massacres by the Ottomans in the 18th and 19th century. Yazidis' religious celebrations. Yazidis celebrate the New Year in Eastern calendar on the 3rd Wednesday of April. They hold that, people hang red flowers, a kind that grows in the mountains at the time of the year, on their house doors, and they decorate eggs. Yazidis hold that God created Taus Malak on this day and celebrate it as a New Year's Day. Yazidis also have a 3-day fasting in the 3rd week of December. Furthermore, some Yazidis who practice religion do another 40-day fasting twice a year. Yazidis population, geographic distribution, and language. Yazidis population is estimated 700,000 people. About half of them live in Iraq. Other Yazidis can be found in Syria, Turkey, Georgia, Armenia, Russia, Sweden, and Germany. There have been a lot of changes in the demographic distribution of Yazidis in the Middle East following the deadly massacres, targeting Yazidis in Syria and Iraq, forcing many of them to flee their home countries, seeking a safer place to live. Most Yazidis speak a Kurmanji, or the Kurmanji language, which is a variety of Kurdish. And it is also the language used for passing on religious traditions. Despite long centuries of brutal persecution, Yazidis have never abandoned their faith, testimony to their remarkable sense of identity and strength of character. My hometown, Bashiqa and Bahzani. So my hometown lies north of Mosul, about 10 miles away. It's actually two parts, Bashiqa and Bahzani. But both parts are usually referred to as Bashiqa. The population of both parts is roughly 35,000 people. Yazidis form the majority, and there are some Muslims and Christians also. The three groups have always lived in coexistence and harmony with each other. This picture just portrays the coexistence that in Bashiqa and Bahzani with people from with Yazidis, Christians, and Muslims standing together. Bashiqa is one of the beautiful towns around Mosul area, and it's famous for its large olive groves and the beautiful mountains. In Bashiqa, there are 2 mosques, 4 churches, and many Yazidi shrines. Local industries in Bashiqa and Bahzani include sesame paste or tahini, pickles, olives, olive oil soap, candy made out of sugar and tahini. And the town used to be the main producer of white liquor in Iraq, an alcoholic drink made out of dates. This one. Language is spoken. Although all Yazidis in Iraq speak Kurdish as their first language, Yazidis in Bashiqa and Bahzani only speak Arabic. And also even their Arabic dialect is very different from the common Iraqi dialect. In fact, it's similar to the dialect spoken in the Levantine countries, such as Syria and Lebanon. Bashiqa location is in Nineveh Plains. Bashiqa lies in an area populated by ethnic and religious minorities called Nineveh Plains. Nineveh Plains is actually part of a larger area separating Kurdistan region from the rest of Iraq. Towns of this area have often been called contested or disputed areas, as Kurdistan regional government has sought to annex them to its autonomous region, claiming that they were originally part of Kurdistan before Saddam did ethnic cleansing and kicked out those towns' Kurdish residents back in the 1970s and 80s. Bashiqa is also surrounded by dozens of villages, largely populated by Shia Muslims called Shabak, who are believed to have originally come from Iran sometime in the 18th century. They speak a language that's similar to Kurdish. This is the exact location of Bashiqa. So you can see how close it is to Mosul. Yazidis were initially safe from the violence that struck Iraq following the U.S. toppling Saddam's regime in 2003. Their towns were in general safe, and Yazidis gained the reputation of being highly trusted by U.S. forces in Iraq as opponents to the bloody insurgency waged against the coalition and Iraqi government forces and civilians. However, in 2007, what's called Islamic State of Iraq, the group that evolved into the current incarnation of ISIS, issued a fatwa or religious edict or religious ruling that all Yazidis should be killed in reprisal for an honor killing of an Yazidi woman who had converted to Islam. 2 weeks later, 24 textile factory laborers from my hometown were murdered as gunmen stopped the bus carrying them from work on their way back home in Mosul. The gunmen had all Christian and Muslim passengers disembark. and they later killed all of the Yazidi laborers. That prompted around 70,000 Yazidis to flee the country. Furthermore, more than 1,000 Yazidi students had to stop attending classes at the University of Mosul for good. In August of that same year, more than 800 Yazidis were killed when 4 truck bombs loaded with explosives destroyed 2 whole villages. It was at the time the single worst terror attack in Iraq since 2003, and the worst terror attack in the world since 9/11. Bashiqa and other towns populated by ethnic and religious minorities became under the protection of the Kurdish forces known as Peshmerga after 2003. Just like I mentioned earlier, that Kurdistan region sought to claim these areas, so they provided some assistance to them in terms of security, providing job opportunities to people, and some other assistance. So when Mosul, Iraq's second largest city, fell to ISIS militants on June 9th, 2014, those minorities in these areas, especially in these areas, thought that ISIS could never reach their towns because of the Kurdish presumably reliable protection, which was not available in Mosul. So they stayed in their towns and never left, even though that Mosul was very close to them. So this is Mosul, and you can see these are the disputed towns. They were very close, and even though they just stayed in their towns because they had pledges from the Peshmerga of protection. So the fall of Sinjar, this is Sinjar, by the way. The fall of Sinjar and neighboring villages to ISIS militants on August 3rd, 2014, meaning almost 2 months, less than 2 months after Mosul fell to militants, was like an unprecedented shock to those minorities when they saw the Peshmerga retreat in the face of ISIS advances to capture their towns. Upon ISIS lightning advance, around 50,000 Yazidis had to flee to the neighboring craggy mountain known as Mount Sinjar. They ended up, like for fear of being persecuted by the ultra-extremist organization. They ended up stranded on that mountain with no food, water, and shelter in Iraq's scorching summer for weeks. ISIS took over other minorities' towns a few days later. But these towns were empty at the time, as their residents had already fled before ISIS militants showed up. They knew when they saw what happened in Sinjar, they knew that their towns would be next, so they just fled their towns. Some Yazidis' Muslim neighbors in Sinjar, with whom Yazidis had lived in coexistence for centuries, sided with ISIS militants and facilitated their advance into Yazidi towns. Considered devil worshippers, Yazidis who had fallen into the hands of ISIS during the invasion of their villages were brutally mistreated, abused, and murdered. Those who couldn't escape were captured by ISIS brutal militants, who initially killed hundreds of men of them in mass executions because they refused to convert to Islam. Furthermore, thousands of Yazidi women were taken as war spoils to Mosul, where they would be used as sex slaves. Also, ISIS abducted all the children they found in the area, all the Yazidi children, in order to brainwash them and use them as suicide bombers in their jihadist wars. Airdropped food and supplies by US planes and Iraqi helicopters to those stranded on top of the mountain helped some of them, but were nevertheless not enough because of the high number of the civilians trapped on that mountain. Many children and elderly died of hunger. In its propaganda, ISIS employed an interpretation of the Quran described by moderate Muslims as extreme and untrue to support its claim that followers of the Yazidi faith were apostates or not being people of a book. And so it was allowed to kill their men, sexually enslave their women, besides looting and destroying their property. they gave the right to themselves to do all these crimes. Those who escaped ISIS massacres and resorted to Kurdistan of Yazidis had to live in very harsh conditions. A lot of them ended up living in IDP camps, or internally displaced people camps, because they were unable to afford renting a place in a region known for its high cost of living. There has been a very slow response to the Yazidis' plight by Baghdad government. Following the massacres targeting Yazidis and the humiliating displacement they had to endure, tens of thousands of them decided to take the risky journey of migration through smuggling routes by land and sea to Europe, and especially to Germany, seeking a safe life in religiously tolerant communities in exile. The Yazidis have lost hope of rebuilding their life in Iraq, where they realize that besides being targeted by extremists, they have often been considered collateral damage in the country's endless sectarian and political conflicts. A lot of Yazidi women held by ISIS committed suicide while in captivity. Some others managed to escape. One of those who escaped ISIS captivity, Nadia Murad, 21 years old, was able to make it to Germany, where she joined an Yazidi non-profit organization called Yazda. She later became a vocal activist in the global efforts of fighting human trafficking and toward war countries, telling people about the atrocities committed against the Yazidis and urging the international community to act and save the thousands of Yazidi women held by ISIS. In September 2016, she was named UN Goodwill Ambassador for the dignity of survivors of human trafficking. She was also nominated for Nobel Peace Prize in the same year. In November 2015, the Peshmerga, the Kurdish forces, accompanied by heavy US-led coalition air support, managed to retake Sinjar from ISIS after a fierce fight that left the town heavily damaged. The town was so damaged in the fight that its mayor said that it would cost less to build a totally new town in another location than rebuilding the current one. Even though that the majority of Yazidis of Sinjar had lived a very harsh life in IDP camps in Kurdistan, only few of them decided to make it back to their hometown after its liberation. My hometown, Mushtaq Al-Rashidany, was liberated in November 2016. Actually, it was liberated on this day of last year. So today is the first anniversary of its liberation. What a coincidence. However, during the 27-month period, the ISIS militants occupied town, they looted all property, set up booby traps in every corner of it, burned many of its houses and buildings, including my parents, made big holes in the houses they stationed in, and dug a vast network of tunnels underground in town to facilitate their movement from a place to another, just like rats, without being spotted by US warplanes and Peshmerga forces stationed on the mountain. Furthermore, many of the houses where ISIS militants or ISIS snipers were holed up were targeted by the coalition fighter jets, often destroying a whole building to kill a sole sniper. The town's vast green cover, represented by the evergreen olive groves, dried and died after being left without care and irrigation for 27 months under ISIS' reign of terror. A lot of families have made it back to town by now, whereas many others had already migrated to Europe during the harsh times they spent in displacement. Mushtaq and other minority towns are still haunted by the yet political conflict between Kurdistan region and Iraqi government. So my hometown before ISIS and after ISIS. So those are the olive groves that were covering the town, and now they all dried and died. Nothing left. That's what ISIS came for, death and destruction. So Yazidis are believed to have been brutally targeted throughout most of their history for more than 72 times with the aim of annihilating them. Their small number nowadays compared to their ancient existence is mainly the result of many of them being murdered during many of those genocide campaigns. Yazidis believe that with the current chaos in the region, in the Middle Eastern region, there might be more persecution campaigns targeting them in the near future in case they make it back to their hometowns. And if many of them were lucky enough to survive this time, their survival may not be possible if persecuted again. There has been a growing religious extremist trend in the Middle East over the last several years that's all but to stop soon. And religious minorities seem to have been the high-value target for this trend. And if nothing is done by regional and international powers to protect religious minorities in the Middle East, we might see all of them out of that area or the region in a few years. They are a fundamental part of the culture and history of the Middle Eastern region. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mushtaq, for that
Thank you.
incredible talk. It's going to take me a few days to process. That's a lot of information. So what we're going to do right now is open it up to a few questions from the audience. We're going to keep it to about 10 or 15 minutes of questioning. This mic will be passed around. I do ask that we keep the questions relevant to the material that Mushtaq has discussed, and that we also be respectful to the extent to which he was willing to share his own story and limit further personal questioning. So as rule number one, please be thoughtful and, of course, always kind. So here is a microphone, and we'll take some questions.
Thank you so much. Sorry. Thanks so much for coming in and speaking with us. Really appreciate it. My name's Drew. I'm a student here at UM. Yeah, it was just incredible. Yeah, like she said, it's going to take, a couple days to process this. But do you have any, I guess, points of reference from your culture that you'd like to see implemented a little bit better in our culture, in Montana, in the United States, in the Western world? And again, thanks again. Really appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for your question. Well, I guess the only aspect I would like to see is just like seeing more social relationships among people inside the community. That's the only, like we enjoy a lot of social relations. Not saying that they do not exist here, but like they are more warm and affectionate where I lived in Iraq or in my hometown. I guess that would be the thing that I would like to see. Yeah. Yes.
Yes, after the recent independence vote in Kurdistan, and it seems like the movement of official security forces into that region, what's the prospect now for the next coming months?
It's highly uncertain. There's a high level of uncertainty in that region. And like the situation is very fluid. Like there are changes happening every day right now. And apparently that the Kurds are very frustrated by the role played by the US government in Iraq, because they thought that after we fought ISIS with you for 3 years, we expected you just to side with us in our honor and noble cause to get independence from the Iraqi government. Apparently that's not going to happen. I mean, they're not going to get their independent state right now. Maybe just the timing wasn't very great for their independence or their endeavor. And the Iraqi government has been trying to be very nice and peaceful with the Kurds. But because they lost a lot, so they are very angry and frustrated, and that seems to be understandable, I guess, yeah. I mean, talking about my hometown was one of the disputed areas where the referendum happened. And a lot of people in my hometown voted yes for referendum because they favor Kurdistan to the rest of Iraq. They said that we are much better off with Kurdistan than the rest of Iraq. And then now, with what happened after the vote, Kurdish forces pulled out from my hometown. Now my hometown is more vulnerable to violence than it was probably 3 weeks ago because Iraqi forces took over. And not everyone is happy with that. Yes.
Thank you, Mushtaq. Do you have any communication with anyone in your hometown region, and how? And how do you get news?
Well, sometimes I watch TV. I watch channels from home. And I get information over Facebook from my friends and my family members. And I also get in touch with my family members over the internet to get information and updates about the situation there. Right now it's very unstable, actually. Yeah, and people are not very comfortable. And they are worried about their situation because they said that a lot of strangers have already gotten into town since the Kurdish forces pulled out, which is not pleasing. Yeah. Yes, Heather.
Okay. Okay, I just don't understand why the U.S. didn't, if people voted and it was 92% that they wanted to separate, why don't people support that? I guess I don't get that.
Well, U.S. apparently has priorities. So the U.S., when the U.S. came to Iraq and toppled Saddam in 2003, Saddam's regime, they said that we came to Iraq not to break Iraq apart, to keep Iraq united so that its people would never think that the U.S. came just to divide the Iraqis and create chaos in their country so that other countries, for example, Israel, would benefit from that, just like what many people think. And so like the independence or the vote in Kurdistan for independence angered Turkey, Iran, and the Iraqi government. And I guess the United States does not want to risk deteriorating its relationship with Turkey and the Iraqi government for the Kurds. So their priority is just to remain, to keep good ties with the Iraqi government and to keep the region as a whole stabilized, because they think that if the Kurds get their independence, that a lot of instability will follow. And the U.S. said that it's not a good timing for you. Yeah, they just told them that it's not a good timing. And I guess if the Bush administration was in office, things would have been different, because the Bush administration paid more attention to what happened in Iraq, unlike the Obama administration or the Trump administration. People said that Bush was much better for Iraqis than others. And that's understandable, because Bush was trying to take responsibility for what happened there. So the Bush administration tried to provide all sorts of assistance to the Iraqis, especially in solving Iraq's political problems, because they are chronic problems. They cannot be solved. And the late leader of Iraq, or President Jalal Talabani, was like a negotiator and middleman, or someone who was always trying to bring the Iraqis together. And he died a month ago. So with his death, I guess a lot of problems are going to be back. Yes.
What is the average Iraqi's view of Americans and American interventionism in the Middle East? I mean, is it seen more positively? Because it seems like, based on what you just said, that it is seen more positively, as if the U.S. is trying to help Iraq. But
unfortunately, it is not. I guess that Iraqis have this trait of being strong believers in the conspiracy theory. They have always thought that all the problems that are happening in the Middle East are planned by the U.S. government. No matter what the United States does in Iraq, people's view of the U.S. government actions will always be negative, in general. Not all of them, in general. They said that the U.S. backed Saddam in the war with Iran, and then drove Saddam out of Kuwait, and then imposed economic sanctions, and then attacked Saddam again. And now it's here to create more chaos in Iraq. So what does the U.S. want? It's just destruction of the Iraqis. That's what they think. No matter how I tried many, many times to convince people around me that the opposite was the right thing, they said, no, you are naive to think that the U.S. doesn't know what's going on in Iraq. They said that the U.S. government planned every minute detail of what's happening in Iraq. And I guess it's just hard to convince them otherwise. I try to tell people that the United States has good intentions in Iraq, but it does not implement them in the right way. They say no, it has bad intentions, but try to implement them in a nice way to convince people. So we're kind of like cross opinions. And people would just, like I've talked to doctors, university professors, businessmen, like countrymen, everyone. And they all say, well, the United States controls the whole world. The United States can do anything. I mean, talking about the government. The United States can do anything it wants, wherever it wants, whenever it wants. Don't tell us that the United States cannot solve the problem in Iraq. Don't tell us that the United States cannot defeat ISIS or other extremist groups. It took out Saddam in 3 weeks. How come it cannot take some armed men on pickup trucks? It takes them 3 years to to destroy or defeat ISIS militants, some men on pickup trucks.
Well, I think we have time for one more question before we go to the next part of the evening.
Could you address the Kurds in the other countries? Are there efforts to connect the Kurds in Iraq with the Kurds in Turkey, or?
So you mean connect them?
You are like in a political environment.
It's not easy because Kurds in each country have their own leadership, which sometimes does not get along with the other leadership of the Kurds. So they would sometimes get along, but sometimes not. And part of the reason that the Kurds lost the disputed areas when Iraqi forces and Shia militia advanced into them is that the Kurds among themselves didn't have a unified opinion. The Kurds of the PUK, or the Patriotic Union of Kurdistan, had Peshmerga forces stationed in Kirkuk. Those forces pulled out when the Iraqi forces arrived, and they said that we wanted to avoid any more bloodshed in the region. But the Kurdish leadership, represented by Masoud Barzani, who is the leader of the KDP, Kurdish Democratic or Kurdistan Democratic Party, said that you have betrayed us. So he accused the other party, whose Peshmerga were stationed in Kirkuk, of betraying the Kurdish cause of getting an independent state. And right now, there are still a lot of problems among them or between them. So they are not always, they don't always get along with each other. And that's one of their major problems.
Well, thank you again so much, Mushtaq.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thanks so much.
So we're going to kind of take a minute to change a little bit of a directions here.
Mm-hmm.
And Jen and I will do just a really brief presentation on kind of resettlement in Missoula, how it's gone this past year, and a really brief look at 2018 with some of the national events that are happening. So Jen, do you want to come up and we'll get a mic on you? So Soft Landing, Missoula, I'm going to give you a brief kind of what we do and how our year has gone, and then Jen will do the same with the International Rescue Committee. So we were formed in 2016 in response to the global refugee crisis and asking, is there more that we here in Missoula can do for refugees? We found out that with a little elbow grease and the support of an incredible community, I recognize so many of you here tonight, that there certainly was a lot more that we could do. So besides bringing you lectures such as this one and engaging in education and conversation throughout the state about welcoming refugees, we also provide direct services for refugee families that are resettled in our community, such as English classes, driver's ed, managing in-kind donations. We provide avenues for volunteerism and community engagement through tutoring, events, and participation in our programming, and cultural exchange through community events such as the events we just put on for Welcoming Week. And spoiler alert, I know I heard the audience when the food pictures were shown. So hopefully some more food opportunities coming soon. But one really, really important piece of our work are partnerships with the community. And tonight we have an important partnership here with the International Rescue Committee. I'm introducing Jen Barilli, and she's the Resettlement Director for the International Rescue Committee in Missoula. When Soft Landing began our quest to welcome refugees to Missoula, we very quickly found out that that work of resettling refugees was only done by 9 agencies nationwide. And those agencies hold a contract with the State Department to do that work. So if we wanted to help refugees by bringing them here to Missoula, we would need to get the ear of one of those 9 agencies to open an office. And we're so very grateful and very thankful that the International Rescue Committee took us up on that, that request. And all of the refugee families that are coming to Missoula currently are doing so through the Missoula International Rescue Committee office. And then Soft Landing just works to support their work in our community and, of course, the families that come here. So Jen is here with us tonight to share a look at this past year and talk about some of those partnerships.
Thanks, Mary. You guys can hear me okay? And thank you for inviting me to come up here tonight. So I appreciate that. So I just wanted to start by kind of giving just a quick recap of the past year. Some of you may know we kind of operate on a fiscal year that runs from October 1st to the end of September. So this past year just recently wrapped up, and a lot of great things have happened. Well, first, we actually have resettled 32 families here in Missoula, refugee families, over the past year, well, since we've been open in October 2016. So that's really exciting. You know, the families are thriving, they're working, they're out in the community. I'm sure you guys have seen them out and about. And each year, stakeholders in the community talk with the State Department, and the State Department kind of determines the number of refugees that can come to Missoula and be able to thrive, you know, that the community could support a certain number of refugees and do it well. And so last year, 2017, Missoula was slated to resettle 125 individual refugees in Missoula. And as many of you know, there's been a lot of up and down and back and forth with the current administration and executive orders. So we did not reach our 125 goal, but we came pretty close in 2017 and received around 91 refugees. And so many of you also know we are mostly resettling refugees from the Democratic Republic of Congo, Eritrea, Syria, and Iraq. And we have had some families from Ethiopia as well. And so our goal in Missoula is to sort of focus on receiving those families so that they can build communities here and support one another. So we'll continue to do that. A lot of things have happened specifically for that International Rescue Committee office in the past year. When we first opened, we had about 2.5 staff, and it was pretty chaotic. And over the past year, we have grown tremendously. We have 5 full-time staff now, and also we have interpreters on staff. So we're able to not only serve the refugee clients better, but we're able to serve the community better. Our interpreters can be hired to interpret for appointments and things like that. So, you know, the things that we were doing initially, we do case management. So we have some caseworkers. They are, you know, picking people up from the airport when they arrive. enrolling people in English language classes, enrolling children in school, making referrals for healthcare screenings, mental health appointments, helping with permanent resident cards or green cards. We give families cultural orientation on life in the U.S. So those are the things we kind of are always doing. But now that we've grown, we've been able to hire an employment specialist. So Becca, who's here in the audience, who helps connect folks to employment. She does employment placement and job readiness training. So there's a lot of work behind the scenes to really try to help these families thrive here in Missoula. We were able to hire Heather, our housing and logistics caseworker, who helps secure housing for refugees when they arrive. We're connecting families to childcare. So there's a lot that we've been able to do this past year, and it's been really awesome to see us grow. And on that note, Mary kind of mentioned we can't do it without our volunteers and our community partners. So IRC has been training, I think, so far, maybe over 150 family mentor volunteers, which is amazing. These are community volunteers that we train to work with incoming refugee families to help them to adjust to life in the U.S. That's pretty amazing. We work with a number of folks in the Missoula community, so community members that are volunteers, of course, but also our community partner agencies from, the City of Missoula, Job Service, Office of Public Assistance, Missoula Federal Credit Union. There are so many players in the community that are coming together, working with IRC, Soft Landing, to really try to welcome refugees and to make sure they're successful here in Missoula. And I think Mary's going to share a little bit more specifics about some of the partnerships. And one last thing before that I forgot to mention is also I just want to let folks know that we actually meet, we've been meeting monthly, but we'll be shifting to quarterly, but we actually meet with community members and other community agencies to do consultations often to talk about, A, how to best serve refugees that are here in Missoula, but B, what are the challenges? What are things that are coming up? How can we do things better? So that we get a lot of input from the Missoula community, and then also I meet with the different populations of refugees that are coming to get feedback from them as well on what we could be doing better. So these are all things that really, when we first started, we didn't have the capacity to do, and this past year we've been able to kind of expand and serve everyone in a better capacity.
Yeah, and we just wanted to give you a quick example just to kind of get an idea of what some of these partnerships look like. We're going to call it a case study, so we sound all fancy since we're at the university. So this is our case study. And this is just one of the opportunities for partnership in the community and how incredible it's been. So if you look at English language learning in Missoula, you can see that there are limited but very highly quality services. They're both adult and child refugees that were needing increased language experience, increased English language experience. So the Lifelong Learning Center already had our only free adult English learning program, and it's a spectacular program, but with limited times and increased clientele, there's of course room for additional help. This was the same with Missoula County Public Schools. The additional students needing English language services can be a challenge for any school system. And again, with a high quality yet very small English language program, there was room for additional help. So, and then on the other hand, we have these hundreds and hundreds of volunteers that are coming to the IRC, that are coming to Soft Landing saying, how can we help? We have this great need for English tutoring. But they are not always coming with the right skill set to tutor English. So the IRC Family Mentor Volunteers, who are also tasked with creating opportunities to help families they're working with to learn English, again, they are not necessarily feeling confident in this area. So we partnered with Missoula County Public Schools to provide over 30 volunteers that they then train to work with students during school hours. And so now every single English language learning student, refugee or otherwise, gets individual one-on-one tutoring multiple times a week. And then on top of this, the Lifelong Learning Center, as I said before, the adult program here in Missoula, With input from Soft Landing, the IRC, Missoula County Public Schools, they had the opportunity to actually create a class for these volunteers, for these tutors, to gain skills and knowledge and how to best serve and best tutor English. So this is just, and really this is just this partnership in its first year. So, you know, in coming years, there's so much more room to partner on things like that. So just to look at one of the many complex and dedicated networks that exist and are growing in Missoula to serve refugees.
Thanks. And I wanted to just give a brief snapshot of moving forward into 2018. So our fiscal year of 2018 started October 1st. Obviously, there's been a lot of up and down, back and forth with the refugee admissions program here in the U.S. But Missoula is continuing to resettle refugee families from those same populations. Things have slowed down, so which, you know, is unfortunate, but it gives us the ability and all of our partners the ability to, you know, put programs in place to serve families better once refugee admissions, you know, resumes at its normal rate, right? Yeah, I mean, there have been some delays, and, you know, the refugee cap of refugees entering the United States for this fiscal year, it has been capped at 45,000, which differs dramatically from last year, well, from when President Obama set that cap at 110,000 refugees. That's for the United States. So things are slowing down, but we are seeing, continuing to see families come and resettle families here in Missoula.
And what are our numbers again?
Oh, yeah, thank you. So, you know, we'll see. But, you know, I mentioned earlier the State Department had set the amount of refugees to come to Missoula last year at 125. And we came close. We didn't hit that number. This year, the State Department is suggesting that number drop slightly to 120 refugees. We hope we get those numbers. We do think, you know, obviously things are going to be slower, but that's based on the capacity of our Missoula community, and so we hope that we can get as close to that number as possible.
Awesome. Thanks, Jen.
Thanks.
So, does anyone have any questions? Yes. Okay, I'm going to run this mic around.
Do you want to share this?
Okay.
Hi, Erica. Thank you. So I get notified at the IRC when a refugee or a refugee family is coming, and we don't get a lot of notice sometimes. So just to give you a picture, 2 to 4 weeks notice, and lately it seems like it's about 2 weeks notice before a family arrives. So that's when the IRC staff, like Heather, our housing caseworker, is, you know, she has 2 weeks to find housing. You know, that gives Soft Landing a couple weeks to like pull together donations for furniture to set up housing. So it happens pretty fast. Yeah, so we move quickly. Luckily, we have a ton of volunteers to help.
Hi, thanks. What I wanted to remind people of is that, you know, it sounds so nice and sanitary and everything with refugees coming here, and it's a really nice thing to do. But the thing is these people are running for their lives a lot of times. Mm-hmm. They aren't coming here just on vacation. They're coming here because they have nowhere else to go, no place they're safe. So I just wanted to remind that everything we do is in reference to people that really, really need our help.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate that. You're right. I mean, it can feel really good to help families, of course, but there is that reality that families and individual refugees that are coming here to Missoula are fleeing some pretty dire situations. And so that's where the partnerships come in handy, you know, connecting folks to mental health services and, you know, healthcare services and things like that. So yeah, that's the reality. I appreciate you bringing that up.
Other questions? We have a quiet room tonight. Oh, thanks.
I just want to thank John that just spoke, because he is my #1 consistent person that helps me move in all the homes. So thank you, John.
Thank you.
No one is safe.
All right, well, do we have 1 or 2 more questions? We're good? Okay. Well, thank you guys so much for being here. Of course, thanks to all our sponsors and Christopher and Mushtaq and Jen and the IRC. And we're very, very grateful and honored to be able to kind of be a catalyst to share information with folks. So thank you, and we'll see you for our next lecture.
Thank you.